On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be bringing in Nick Fairbanks for another edition of Fairbanks Friday. It's a post-game edition of the show. We'll be discussing the Florida Panthers' 3-1 victory over the New York Islanders. We're going to talk about how great Sergei Bobrovsky looked and how Matthew Tkachuk looked in his first game in a Panther sweater. We'll be discussing that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, October 14th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL. We'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, the Florida Panthers find a way to defeat the New York Islanders in their first of 3 road games to start the season by a final score of 3-1. In this one, really the story was really the goalies and the penalty kill for both teams. The Florida penalty kill really set the tone, creating so many opportunities. Rushes going the other way, 2-on-1. Sergei Bobrovsky stood tall with 16 saves in the first period. And then the Florida Panthers took the second period, really dominated the period, and really never trailed in this one. And despite a slight scare of the New York Islanders, the Panthers responded 30 seconds later. Patric Hornqvist gets the second goal of the game. And really, Matthew Tkachuk, what can we say more about Matthew Tkachuk? With 16 shot attempts, gets his empty net goal, first goal as a Panther on his 16th attempt in an empty net. And Eetu Luostarinen got also the first goal of the game for the Panthers in one of the weirdest goals you'll ever see, but it was just a pure example of getting the puck to the net. And that is how the Florida Panthers got a 3-1 victory over the New York Islanders. First game, lots of turnover for the Panthers this offseason, and more importantly, a W. And a W on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nick, welcome back on what is a post-game edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Thank you for having me back, and I can't even remember the last time we actually did one of these, outside of maybe possibly a preseason, but it's good to get back in the saddle. Good to start off with a win too. Saw a lot of good things. You saw the turnover with the team and that, they're starting to gel, but maybe their timing's not quite there, but you saw a lot of good things, a lot of things that you didn't see last season, but things that could hopefully be sustainable going forward.
Yeah. And like I said, it was the Florida Panthers and both the New York Islanders. It was really a defensive game for the Panthers. And at times I felt like it was more controlled by the Islanders because that's just their style of play. Of course, the Panthers are playing in their barn. Ilya Sorokin's one of the best goalies in the National Hockey League currently, likely going to be a candidate for the Vezina. But still, despite at times the Florida Panthers playing New York's type of game, at least based on the reputation that we've seen in the last few years, they find a way to win. They find a way to not allow the Islanders to really get into the dirty areas. And we've even seen some instinctual plays by Sergei Bobrovsky. There was a big rush from Casey Cizikas, and Sergei Bobrovsky had to make the instinctual decision to go out of his net to disrupt any type of rush for the New York Islanders there. So it was a grinded out win, not an easy one. And it was during the game I was talking about mostly, especially going to that second period where the Panthers were still on the power play, thinking, okay, The Islanders are that team where if they're down 2 goals, it's really hard for that team specifically to come back. So the key for the Panthers was really to just get that 2-goal separation to start the third period. Of course, they didn't get it. It took them until that empty net goal to really break away from this game. But hey, you don't complain about wins in this league.
No, and this was more of a defensive-minded / playoff game. I mean, it was tough. It was gritty. There was not a lot of open space, but when there was, it seemed like both teams were kind of going back and forth on that. Like the Islanders would have a few chances, and Florida would come back and have a few chances as well. But luckily, nobody was hurt by that. It just the game finally settled down. Matthew Tkachuk was definitely the best player on the ice tonight. He was noticeable from the start. Almost scored on his first shift, which was awesome. He did his signature play where he tried to put the puck between his legs and, just kind of skirted through the blue paint. But that was awesome to see. And every time he had the puck, he was always looking to shoot. And that's what Florida brought him in to do, is not only be a chirper, play the body, play a two-way defensive game, but also to shoot the damn puck. And we got a good taste of it tonight. Second best player on the ice was definitely Bob. I thought Bob had a stellar game, had a few stops that I was really questioning, like, okay, this could be your typical Bob goal where he's going to let it in a 5-hole, and he just stood on his head and made it happen. The only way the Islanders were able to score tonight was because of, Eetu Luostarinen putting 2 goals in the net. He scored his first one off of a deflection, and then he scored one for the Islanders, unfortunately, on a deflection off of Dobson's shot, and Bobrovsky didn't have a shot at that one. But no complaints here about the team at all. You could tell that everybody was definitely bought into the game plan of what they were going to do coming in, and they executed it.
Absolutely. And I want to actually take an opportunity to talk a little bit about a new Panther, Josh Mahura. Playing on that third pair with Radko Gudas, saw a little bit of power play 2 time, but there was a shift that I saw. We were talking about a pre-recording that we saw him keeping up with Matthew Barzal, and Matthew Barzal is not an easy person to keep up with, and not allowing Matthew Barzal to get past him. And this is one of the other, I'm not saying that Josh Mahura is going to be like a Gus Forsling as far as like waiver claims for the Panthers, but I kind of like what I saw out of Josh Mahura tonight. How about you?
Definitely, from somebody that I didn't know coming in, and why was Florida bringing this other guy in? They have other players that could step up and play. I think of Carlson, who was waived, unfortunately, and then you have Heponiemi on the front end that was waived as well. That's now down in Charlotte. You just kind of wonder, like, well, what is their thinking here? And I think we got a little bit of a taste of what Mahura can actually bring to the team. He is more of an offensive-minded defenseman because he can skate. But as you said, he was able to track down Barzal and everything. And as long as you can maintain or contain those type of players and everything, you should be successful most of the time.
Absolutely. And that's and when someone has a chip on their shoulder and they are no longer on the team that that drafted them, that great opportunity for Mahura to try to make an impact. But really, one thing that is a continuous trend for this Panthers is just their ability to just use their speed to consistently draw penalties. I mean, the second period alone, being able to draw 3 penalties and taking their time to be on the man advantage in total as far as PIM for the Islanders, 10 minutes where the Panthers had their opportunity to just control the puck. 5-on-5, they were outstanding. Really, the stretch of the game where the Islanders really controlled most of the possession was really that 4-on-4 towards the end of the first period, and then towards the end when they brought the extra skater. But other than that, I didn't really see the Panthers really give too many they had the Islanders had their opportunities, but what I mean is controlling possession. Outside of that 4-on-4 and then towards the end of the game, I didn't see really the Panthers letting up.
No, I think the forwards did a fantastic job of forechecking and then also being responsible in the defensive zone of not giving them a lot of time. I have to give credit to the blue liners as well, because they stood up at the blue line, not allowing the Islanders an easy in. They'd always have to chip it in and go dig for it. And more often than not, Florida was either battling for that puck or actually winning those battles. So that was actually really nice to see rather than just letting the team, skate through the zone and get an opportunity. Um, you know, the penalties that the Islanders took were just because of hard work that the Panthers, were doing. They were skating. If there was a stick in their mid area or they felt like they had a chance to get a call, they were always moving. I will say though, the penalties that the Panthers took were one of them saved the goal. So thank you,
Yes.
Radko Gudas, for covering for Mark Stahl on that one, because that I was having nightmares. Of Keith Yandel and Mackenzie Weegar give ups there. So it was a little scary, but it was a necessary penalty. And I think Florida was able to clean up pretty well, considering they only gave up 1 goal.
Yeah, and let's actually talk a little bit more about Mark Stahl in segment number 2, and also Matthew Tkachuk and Sergei Bobrovsky as well, because what incredible games by those two. And of course, continuing to have the conversation of where this blue line stands for the Panthers. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all your football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, and podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I have Nick Fairbanks here in the house recapping a 3-1 road victory over the Florida Panthers. And listen, Nick, I know it's one game for the Panthers, and we were talking a little bit about Mark Stahl pre-recording, and even a little bit towards the end of that first segment. But we were talking about that turnover in their own zone that got Radko Gudas to the box, and we talked about how it saved the goal. I mean, a few seconds later, Noah Dobson gets it to the net, and a lot of bodies right in front of Sergei Bobrovsky, nothing he can do. And despite all that, 32 of 33 for Sergei Bobrovsky. What a night for him. But it's just the continued questions of like what this blue line looks like, and it's just not something that's going to go away after one night. But hey, the Panthers found a way to win, but still, it's really still something to like monitor later on into the season. And we spoke about Mark Stahl and his big frame, and kind of you were talking about pre-recording about how the Panthers really see Mark Stahl as really just a big guy.
Yeah, and I to be honest with you, I think this is the only thing he's going to be able to bring, because if you saw him play with the puck tonight and everything, his passes weren't crisp. His skating wasn't up, to par. Not to say that his skating ever really has been up to par. Not taking any shots or anything. It's just his skating is not his best attribute. And then unfortunately with that giveaway, he passed it right to an Islander that created a goal scoring chance. And thankfully Radko was there to bail him out. But there was other areas where he could not decide what to do with the puck or clear it quick enough. And, in this game, if you have possession of the puck, you can't get rid of it quick enough, then it's got to be next man up. It's got to be somebody younger, somebody faster. And you can't help but think that maybe Stahl will be, just maybe, sitting up in the press box a couple games this year. But, that begs into question then, who else is going to take his place? Is it going to be a Carlson? Is Matt Kirkstad going to come up and actually take his spot? And what's the salary cap situation going to look like? Because that's basically it. I mean, we couldn't sign Eric Stahl because we don't have any cap space. We have Anthony Duclair, who's on IR right now. And when he comes back, what are they going to do with cap space with that? But other than that huge talking point, I was happy with Ekblad. He played very well defensively tonight. Maybe only had one blooper, unfortunately, and I think against Barzal, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Gus Forsling played the way he does. I thought he was noticeable. Gudas played his game. I think he limited the hits, which was a good thing, because I know towards the end of last season, he was looking to maim anybody he could. And then Montour, he's quarterbacking the power play right now, which I think is going to take a little bit of adjusting for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he'll be fine. But My only ask is that when he shoots is that he gets them on net, or at least gets it in the area so that somebody has a chance at a juicy rebound. But other than that, I have no complaints about the defense after the first period.
And looking at the power play for the Panthers, we talked about earlier how they had 10 minutes of ice time, 0 for 5 on the power play, but 21 shot attempts with 7 of them getting on the net. So a lot of deflections and all. So 33% of their shot attempts getting to the net. But let's also talk about Patric Hornqvist as well. This was a game where, despite the first and second line getting their chances, not getting anything through the net, but the actual conversions coming from the bottom six of the Panthers. Of course, we spoke about Eetu Luostarinen. It's crazy. Get the puck into the net and crazy things can happen. And who would have thought that Eetu would have gotten the first goal of the season? I know that wasn't on my bingo card, but Patric Hornqvist, we were talking all off season about the best way for the Panthers to create cap space is an easy answer, at least from our perspective, is the cap hit of where Patric Hornqvist sits. But the checking of the forechecking of the fourth line, Ryan Lomberg getting the puck onto the net, and then Patric Hornqvist's ability to retrieve the puck, wrap it around, and still keep the puck on his stick after Sorokin, it gets on Sorokin's glove. And hey, that's kind of the veteran leadership that the Florida Panthers appreciate from someone like Patric Hornqvist. And not a goal that you always script out, but definitely something that, even though Patric Hornqvist isn't the same Patric Hornqvist from Pittsburgh, and even in his first season as the Panthers, hey, it's great to see that he got on the scoreboard on Thursday night.
Yeah, and what a timely goal. I mean, that's what veterans are there for, is to actually put the teams in position to win, or at least have scoring chances. And the response they had after the Dobson goal was perfect. 30 seconds later, you're forechecking, you are able to drive around behind the net and then just wrap it around and put one in on Sorokin. I don't think I don't think Hornqvist really, is one of those wraparound type guys. Like, he's not quite quick enough to like go around the back of the net and do it. But you know what? He's a big guy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he can power his way through it and score like he did. But I think that goal actually turned the momentum again, because I think the Islanders were, they were kind of on their heels a little bit. They got the power play, they scored, and now the momentum was back on their side of things. And then here comes Hornqvist on the other side, just taking it right away. And Florida never looked back after that. I felt like they had a solid game after that defensively. Didn't let Bob, struggle. They kind of let him see the puck, and were clearing out a bunch of rebounds. So again, just being able to create chances and make an impact on a game. That's all we can ask for Hornqvist.
And we're starting to kind of see now, I mean, it's only one game, but kind of like where the Panthers are, at least in one game, of when they have a lead late into the third period. It's just really about being responsible in your own end. And even though there's an opportunity to have a check in the neutral zone, to not overcommit to something, because then that's an opportunity for someone to get a huge breakaway, and Bob could be left out to dry. So I noticed that the Panthers weren't doing too much to like overcommit on a check, and really they helped out Sergei Bobrovsky. And just looking at some of the heat charts on like 5-on-5 on Natural Stat Trick, the areas on 5-on-5, it's not colored dark for the Islanders right in front of net. And just looking at that, it's a big thumbs up whenever I look at that. That's for sure.
That's something that I guess we would not expect coming into the season, because I know there's a lot of questions. I mean, we just talked about it, about the defensive core, the blue line coming into the season. My first prediction is, are Bob and Knight going to get lit up this season because we have a bunch of new people here. We have some experience, but again, the whole team's learning a whole new system as well. Are they going to buy in? And, how quickly is it going to take them to actually get to, knowing the system? And, they played pretty well tonight. And I'm really happy that Bob was able to have the performance he did, and the fact that he's able to start a season off this way rather than, let's say, last season, where the Panthers were trailing and had to come back and claw back against the Pittsburgh Penguins and everything, and Verhaeghe scoring the game winner. This was a complete team win, so very happy to see that.
Yep, you and I were there to witness, and as fun as those high scoring games were. Sometimes you gotta appreciate some of these low scoring wins. It's just like in postseason baseball when it's just like a pitcher's duel. Those are just you just think to yourself, when is a team gonna break through? And it took a little bit for both of these teams too. But hey, the Panthers are on the winning end, 1-0-0 to start the season before heading to Buffalo on Saturday at 1 p.m. matinee matchup against division rival Buffalo. And Nick, I know it's a matinee game, and mostly in past years we would see the Panthers go with Spencer Knight to play in a matinee game. But I think because it's so early in the season, I wouldn't doubt if we see Sergei Bobrovsky again on Saturday against Buffalo.
I wouldn't either, but the question I would have is, do you think that's enough time for him to rest, considering it's this early in the season? Do you start riding him now, or do you just give him a break and get Spencer in there because Spencer just signed his contract? You want to see what you have in him and if he's kind of grown over the summer. So that's just one question I would have is, do you want to start burning out Bobrovsky now? And that's the only thing. Yeah, that's the only thing I have. But other than that, I think if Spencer wasn't knocking on the door, I would definitely say Bob. But you got to see what you got in Knight this season.
Absolutely, and the workload is going to increase. Not necessarily 41 games played, but it's going to be somewhere closer to 41 more than likely. And it might not be one of these matinee games. It might just be a random weekday game in the beginning of the season. So it might be like a two games in one, or like a two games and 2 game stretch. The rotation might be slightly different this season for both the goaltenders. But hey, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Bobrovsky on Saturday, that's for sure. But in segment number 3, we are going to discuss our thoughts on around the NHL and maybe something a little strange that we're seeing on TV broadcast now this time around for not only the Panthers, but around the NHL. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nick Fairbanks is here with me, Armando Velez, on this post-game edition where the Florida Panthers defeat the New York Islanders by a final score of 3-1 at UBS Arena. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the Panthers jersey sponsors, Auto Nation. Not gonna lie. For anyone who grew up in South Florida in early to late 90s, Auto Nation being called Marooney growing up, those old Ghostbuster theme commercials, I still say Marooney every time I hear the Ghostbusters theme. For those who didn't grow up in the area, just look up that video on YouTube. It's available because I searched it myself, and they're still available. But one thing that's really strange, that's a little different that the NHL is doing, is what they're doing around the boards. You can't miss it when you watch on the TV broadcast about how when you're in the arena, you see the same old advertisements, but you're seeing now the different the switching of the advertisements on like a video board, like soccer kind of. And that's a little, honestly, it's something that I'm kind of getting used to, but as someone who kind of watches soccer as well a little bit, it's a little weird now that it's getting into hockey.
So you're taking me back to when I first became a Panthers fan in 1999 when Pavel Bure was acquired, and staying up later to watch the games or watch the replay at midnight, because back then DirecTV would always replay the game, the night previous at midnight or 1 a.m. and just staying up and seeing those commercials with who you gonna call, Mo Rooney. So even though I didn't grow up in South Florida or anything, I still know exactly what you're talking about. So I had to get that out there. But as far as the ads go, I think it's an ingenious idea. I think the technology's there. They just have a few tweaks, because I don't like it when a player goes into the ad and then comes right back out of the ad. Like, what's going on there? It's kind of like a bad N64 emulator. You kind of just go through the wall that you're not supposed to. But I think they will get that fixed. And I think not only is it better for the league because it'll bring in more ad revenue, it might be, a little bit better for the players, because they won't have to deal with ads on the boards. It won't distract them for where the puck is possibly hitting, because it'll be just nothing but whiteboards, along the side. So just interested to see what they're going to go with it. And hopefully Bally Sports, if they're going to be around, kind of gets on that and, can kind of move their scoreboard from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, so I can actually see the advertisements that are trying to be put on and that they're trying to sell me. Just move a little that scoreboard, just a little bit up there, the upper left-hand corner. Be like everybody else. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, and yeah, going and now that we are just about 3 days through the NHL season, there's been a lot of upsets. There's been a lot of Florida Panthers, former Panthers getting on the scoreboard. Mason Marchment got 2 goals for the Dallas Stars on Thursday night, and Frank Vetrano got a goal that cut the deficit for the Ducks to 1. I actually stayed up and watched the end of Edmonton Vancouver on Wednesday, and seeing Connor McDavid just do Connor McDavid things. I watched the whole Colorado Avalanche versus Chicago Blackhawks. I know we've been talking all offseason about how bad Chicago is going to be, but man, I don't know why you put that game as an opening night game where the talent is just that, there's a talent discrepancy like that big. I just wish that there was a better quality game as far as the first game for the Stanley Cup champion. And New York, the Rangers, Chris Kreider scored tonight against the Wild, but even in that first game, even though he didn't get in front of the net, even though he didn't get a puck behind the net, I was looking at his over under as far as like point totals, and I was hitting on that. I was thinking that's going to be under, because how much can he it was only one season where he's had that much of a point total from last season. But hey, he seems like a person who is going to keep up what he did last season. And of course, the big upset that a lot of people are talking about in the Atlantic Division, I didn't watch a single second of that game, but I know you watched it, of Montreal Toronto. Jake Muzzin had a turnover that caused Josh Anderson to get the game winner. So those are stories around the Atlantic Division. And Ottawa gets blown out on Thursday night against the Buffalo Sabres, the new look Ottawa Senators. So what are your thoughts on so far the first 3 days of the NHL season?
Let me start off with my favorite team to talk about, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They did not seem like they had the energy to start a season at all. Their defense looked sloppy. They were turning the puck over. They looked like Mark Stahl most of the game. And just that giveaway from Jake Muzzin over to it didn't go directly to Anderson, but Anderson was able to pick up the puck and he put a beautiful shot on. I don't know if anybody was expecting Murray to save that, because that thing was top corner and it went in, and it just, you could see that Toronto still has the demons left over from last season, and you can see that they're not over it. And Montreal took advantage. Montreal played them hard. Did they possess the puck a lot? No, but they didn't really give Toronto too many chances. And when they did, I mean, Toronto did snipe some in, but You have Cole Caulfield over there to help them out as well. He put 2 past Murray that were pretty sick as well. But yeah, just Toronto looks the same to me. Not really impressed. I mean, I haven't seen or checked. I don't know if they won tonight. I know Matthews scored, so probably they did. But
They
I
did
think it's
against
gonna be
Washington.
okay. Okay, I think it's gonna be a tough season for them. I don't think they're gonna be the world beaters that we all think that they were going to be. Buffalo looks a lot better. I still think that Ottawa's probably going to be one of those teams that I think everybody expects to be a ton better. But again, as we talked about, I think their defense and their goaltending is going to be an issue. And then who else do we have to talk about? The Avalanche against Chicago. I mean, from one side of it, I can see you want to kind of like post up your poster boys right now of who just won the cup. And why not give them a gimme against a team that's probably going to finish less than probably 60 points this season, maybe not even hit 55. So, maybe next year, if you have the cup, champions maybe play against a rival. Yeah, we could see a Tampa and Panthers opening. We've seen it before.
Steve Levy predicted the Panthers to win the cup. John Bucharest did not even have the Panthers making the playoffs.
Yeah, did you see what I said? That Jaws Flying Fluffy should do. I keep wanting to say a different word. What Flying Fluffy wants to do. What I told him he should do if that comes true.
Oh, go ahead and say it. Say it.
I told him to make a nice dish of chicken parmesan, burn it. And then sprinkle some Hoobie snacks if he has any left, and then bury it. If that happens, then I think there's going to be some wholesale changes to Florida because there's no reason why this team shouldn't make the playoffs. But I'll talk about Anaheim. They scrapped last night. That was a team that I also think gets the short end of the stick. Their defense is not good at all, but they have some offensive talent that is out of this world that will keep into a lot of games. And I feel like John Gibson is this generation's Roberto Luongo by far. The way that he plays and the way that he keeps his team in it, and I guess the motivation or just the aura that he has, it's just like Luongo. And I would have loved if we would have acquired him, like be able to move Bob's contract and get John here. That would have been an awesome 1-2 combo between him and Knight.
And the Anaheim Ducks might not make the playoffs, but they're probably going to be one of the most fun non-playoff teams to watch because of Zegras, McTavish, Jamie Drysdale, former Florida Panthers, Troy Terry, Frank Vetrano. That's going to be fun. Matty Bernier's got on the board as well for the Seattle Kraken as well. That's going to be a fun one. He's likely going to be challenging for the Calder Trophy this season as well. So that's gonna be one of those non-playoff teams that are probably going to be one of the most fun ones to definitely keep an eye on. But one team that might actually be in trouble early on, non-Atlantic Division, Washington. They get destroyed by a depleted Boston team, and then they lose in regulation tonight against the Maple Leafs. Of course, Alex Ovechkin is gonna get his goals. It's gonna be probably another season until he breaks Gretzky's record, maybe 2. But even with that signing of Darcy Kemper, they won. The Colorado Avalanche won in spite of Kemper. So it's just really, I don't know if that commitment to Darcy Kemper is going to take them over the top as the skaters in Washington are getting a little older.
You actually hit the nail on the head. I was just going to mention that Washington's getting older. Their captain is, I don't want to say winding down his career because he's obviously chasing Gretzky, but you can just tell that team is not. They're not built for the playoffs. I mean, Florida gave them every chance last season to win that series, and they just couldn't put it away. Whether you want to call it goaltending or, lack of goal scoring from other people other than, TJ Oshie, because it seems like he was scoring all the damn goals for them.
On power play too.
Exactly. And that's a team that I feel like needed to retool this summer. And the only thing that they really did, in my opinion, was Darcy Kemper, and he was the Trent Dilfer of goaltenders last year. So that is a team that needs to retool. Whether they're going to do it this year, they need to do it next year. Pittsburgh had a chance to do it, and they think they can go another year or two with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. So we'll see what happens. I think some of the premier teams that we've been getting used to over the last decade are the ones that are going to start dipping a little bit, and you're going to see some other teams rise here really soon. Buffalo probably being one of them, and then who else in the Metro? Yeah, I don't really think anybody else in the Metro is going to raise up. I think everybody's going to stay status quo.
Yeah, and also the Columbus Blue Jackets lost Patrick Laine after he scored yesterday. So
yeah,
the Blue Jackets might be in a little bit of trouble as far as injuries as well. So that's really something to monitor. Is like how much is Johnny Gaudreau gonna carry them? I mean, Cole Sillinger is a nice piece. I really like Kent Johnson from what I saw in the World Juniors as well. So that's another young team that might not make the playoffs. That might be a really fun one. That's for sure.
They have goaltending too. I mean, they have no shortage of goaltending. I know that their top goaltender,
Merzlikins.
Yeah, Merzlikins is either ill or he's just mildly injured. But their goaltender that they had in last night, Tezarov, I think it was, or Tezarov, he played pretty well, considering that he doesn't have a lot of experience. He looked like he was a veteran in the little bit that I was able to watch. So just some things to look out for. I mean, I really hope that this season has a lot of healthy players, a lot of the stars staying healthy, because the NHL needs it right now, and it's only going to help with the revenue that they're trying to bring up. And hopefully that increases the salary cap significantly in the next year or two, because we as Florida Panthers fan right now are dealing with that issue. Whether you want to blame the former regime or this regime now for spending money or spending first round picks, whatever you want to blame right now, it's just something we're going to have to get through this year. And then hopefully next year we have a little bit more space and a little bit more creativity to add to the team.
And I think that's a great place to end it. And a 1-0 to start the season is definitely a good start. There's going to be some highs and lows throughout the season. Definitely not expecting 122-point season like last year, but hey, a 1-0 start and a road win, 2 points on the road, regardless of the opponent. We'll take that. And I spoke about this with Jacob about how the October schedule is really an opportunity for the Panthers to really take advantage and to start getting ahead, so that they put themselves in the position to still be a playoff team. And then you take it from there, and then get to play your best hockey towards the end of the season, which of course we knew how last year ended. But Nick, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. By the time we meet again next week, we will have one home game down, and we will be previewing the very first regular season matchup against the Tampa Bay Lightning at FLA Live Arena on the 21st. So tell everybody where they can find you online.
Well, I do want to make a correction real quick. I did mess up on Twitter today, which is @Prudential0. I mistakenly said that Florida was over 33 on the power play since the playoffs last season. Thanks to the Twitter followers, they did get one, and I'm sorry if that went over my head, because they were so horrific on the power play during the postseason that they might as well have been over 33. So anyways, thank you guys for calling me out on that. I take full ownership of it, so thank you for keeping me honest. But again, follow me on Twitter @Prudential0, and thank you again for having me on. I'm hoping that we can talk again next Thursday, and we're talking about a 2-0 team.
Absolutely. And thank you once again for joining, and I'll see you next Friday.
See you next Friday.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL, where they'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Steel Roden and Flip Livingstone bring you the fantasy edge and keep you ahead of the competition with daily updates of news, analysis, and advice Monday through Friday. Available on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get podcasts. Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.